So, good evening to all of you. And I am Deepa Mahesh, founder of Purna Wellbeing. And I'm back again with the next edition of Purna Wellbeing Samvada. And this time I have not a guest, Dr. Sushmita Gauri. Welcome, Dr. Sushmita.
Thank you.
So, as you all know, Purna Wellbeing Samvada, the idea is to hold a conversation on a topic that is important to us and to our daily life, to living to our full potential, to living happy, joyous, and with a lot of well-being, holistic well-being. And we thought this topic is of great significance today because um, when in my practice and in general, I see, and my own self, I see that all of us are dealing with these emotions, shame and guilt. So that was the reason I thought of bringing in this topic in this Samvada. And who better than Dr. Sushmita Gauri? I have known her. I mean, she is one of the sought after therapists, and she practiced integrative therapy. And when I needed a therapist, and when I reached out to her, I got an appointment 1 month later. So that busy she is, and in her tenure, she has worked with 2,000 clients since the past 9 years. So, uh, just to talk about her background, after obtaining a doctoral degree in cancer genetics and a brief stint as a senior scientist in the field of drug research, Dr. Sushmita Gauri was drawn to the fact that there is more to health than just its physiological and genetic aspects. And that led her to studying the science and the art of being a therapist in the alternative healing modalities that include integrated clinical hypnotherapy, transpersonal regression therapy, DNA theta healing, Reiki, pranic healing, group work through psychodrama and sociometry, family and systemic constellation, and cure affirmative counseling practice. So today, she practices as an integrative therapist where she applies all her training in a cure affirmative, feminist informed, and trauma informed manner. So she is one of the founders of Violet Hughes Healing Center, and that's in Bangalore, in Tipasangra. And she works with people in a private and confidential setup, and also in groups that are safe and respectful. And these days, she does have sessions on Zoom. So, welcome, Dr. Sushmita Gauri, and it's heartening for me to invite you to this space. And this is a space, honestly, where we aim to spread the knowledge, the awareness, and the practices that can help people to live happy and with a sense of well-being. So, your contribution of being here is really, really very important, and thank you so much for accepting this.
Thank you so much, Deepa, because this is a beautiful platform you've created, and I've been following your, Samvadas and the Chetna series, and I really feel that I'm honored to be sharing this platform with you, and I feel really grateful that we are here today, and I hope we can help by contributing whatever people need to know in a whatever way possible today. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you so much for this.
Thank you. So we go straight into the session, and I think before we go to the topic, I would like to know, and all of us would like to know your journey of becoming an integrative therapist.
Well, I had been a scientist, as you had mentioned earlier, and I was working in drug research, and I realized that the physiology of the body is not just at the physical level, the biochemistry and everything. It is also very much influenced by our emotions, what stressors we have in our day-to-day life. It influences our immunity levels, and that is scientifically already proven.
Yes.
So I was wondering, the root cause of issues could also be worked at the emotional level. And it was by chance I met a therapist in a wedding, a hypnotherapist, and I went through my own journey of therapy with her. And I realized that, wow, this is so beautiful. And I could feel the difference in my body. And that is what led me to first, out of curiosity, learn it like a hobby. I started it like a spiritual hobby. And I was a scientist at that time working in a company. And I love science. It's like science and this therapy field are like two eyes, and I feel I still believe in science, and I still look at things from a scientific perspective. So when I learned the courses, it just led me from one thing to another, and I realized that there's so much more in this, and I was drawn, and I felt more alive and excited about this. And I felt my journey with science as a full-time scientist is transitioning into this. And I also liked the fact that I could be directly in an interface with people, and I could hear, I could really interact with people, and I have the honor of sharing a journey with people, and that kind of was the ultimate draw. So I realized that I wanted to do this. And then since I am a person who questions everything I learn, that's the basic thing about being a scientist. I question everything.
Yes.
And so I would keep asking more and more questions. The more I learned, I had the more number of questions. And therefore, I went on to learn different modalities. And therefore, I became an integrative therapist, because I felt that I was not glued to one technique. And I don't believe that one technique is the answer to everything. Yes. I believe that different people are different, and different people respond to different modalities differently. Yes. And so I feel that it's important to be an integrative therapist. I naturally gravitated towards that.
Yes,
that's
so
my
beautiful. Yeah. So you explored and reached where you have reached, and I think with whatever you have explored, you've really touched so many lives. So that's so awesome. I so agree with what you're saying. All of different people, react to different modalities so differently, with the ultimate aim again, well-being.
Yes.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So let's go into this topic on shame and guilt. And this topic is a heavy one. And before coming to, picking up this topic for Samvada or for Chetana, I never realized that it was so heavy. But in my own process of dealing with these emotions and managing them and really looking at this, I realized they have their energy of their own. And therefore, I call them as heavy emotions, and especially shame. So each of them needs to be dealt with and spoken differently. So please feel free to pick up the way you want, to pick it up. But because it's a very heavy, it's a very heavy emotion, not just in terms of words, but in terms of the energy. Can you share your perspective? What are these two? What is the origin? How does it impact? The Vishwarupa of these two emotions, actually.
Yeah. So the way I see shame and guilt is basically both are very human emotions, right? So there is not a single human being who's not felt it. Yeah. And it's a very natural part of our psychological development. I in fact feel there is something called healthy shame, and there is something called toxic shame. And often in the therapeutic context, we are referring to shame from a toxic level, like the toxic shame that makes us feel small, that makes us feel not good enough, and it minimizes us. It makes us feel incompetent and all of that. But basically, let's first understand what is healthy shame. Yeah.
Correct.
So I would like to give the example of a bunch of puppies. Yeah. Let's say there is a bunch of puppies there. They've just been littered and they are just growing their teeth, and the teething makes them feel the urge to bite. Yeah. So what happens is when puppies bite each other, so they actually, what they do is they bite each other. So then the puppy that's got bitten will actually yell, and it will shout. Yeah. And the puppy that has bitten shies away, and that is shame. So shame is actually a boundary. So it helps us know connection, a healthy connection, and when we are crossing a boundary. So shame is in a way helping us get this sense of boundary and be accountable for what we are doing. How much is too much? We will know what is too much. Yeah. So the example is that puppy actually learns through its own brothers and sisters that what is too much biting, what is painful biting, and what is just friendly biting, and what is friendly holding each other. Right. And we learn that through this experience. And what makes a puppy withdraw from biting when it's bitten too much is a sense of shame. It gives a certain feedback to the brain that this is too much. So I should do this. I shouldn't do this up to this. And then they learn this through this behavior. So imagine if for animals we have this system to learn boundaries. The same way in humans, we also have a system of learning boundaries, learning how to connect healthily. And whenever there is a violation of boundary, there is a certain degree of shame that happens. Yeah. And also it makes us accountable. So for example, if I were to announce to the world that I am going to go on this diet, yeah, or I'm going to go into this fitness regime or something, if I tell the world, I have to now show up, I have to now live that, right? So otherwise what will I feel? I will feel shame. So shame brings about a certain accountability to my actions. It makes me accountable in front of people, in society. So in our human society, healthy shame creates a certain sense of accountability to each other. And that accountability leads to us being able to be cohesive, be able to be together. And since we are all social animals, we are actually able to exist as a group. And healthy shame is a requirement for a healthy society. Now what happens is, when does this healthy shame become toxic shame? Is when shaming happens,
Yes.
So for example, see, I will have my own sense of boundaries, you will have your own sense of boundaries. So for example, wearing a certain kind of a dress for an occasion might be okay for me, but for somebody else it may not be okay for that other person, right? So let's say I wear some very revealing clothes and go somewhere to even maybe a picnic, and let's say somebody finds me in that, and they in their sense of boundary, this feels like a violation. They may come and shame me for wearing revealing clothes. Now that is where it becomes toxic, because shaming is actually a very toxic tool. It should not be used in order to correct somebody. Correction can be done by so now let's look at what is toxic shaming method. Like when I say, oh, you are so stupid, you are so you're a slut, or you're such a bitch, or you using names and labeling yourself. And you had also talked about in Chetana talk also, that self-defeating label. So sometimes the society gives us. So a baby by default doesn't do self-defeating self-talk. We are all born with a healthy sense of shame. And what happens is, parents and teachers, when they say, you are so stupid, why can't you do this little simple mathematics, or you don't know how to dress, or you don't know how to behave, even there, they are still indicating the action. But if in saying that, if they add that you are stupid and therefore you don't know how to do it, or you are not enough, you're not good enough, and now these becomes the narrative that gets internalized, and then we internalize toxic shame.
Yes, exactly. I remember this thing, which a lot of my parents and all others would say in Tamil. It is called "Ni maadu mekki povai." Means you're fit enough to be a cowherd. I mean, now I'm laughing about it, but it is in one sense saying you're stupid. So the issue is, when you say you are stupid as a child, I never understood what was I stupid for. What is the problem?
So shaming can become that way, and there are different forms of shame also. But before we go deeper and deeper into it, I think we should also be aware of not digging too deep into this topic, but to keep it enough that people can digest this, and maybe we'll go deeper as we go along.
Sure. So, let's look at the child. When the child grows up, that's when from healthy, it crosses that boundary to become toxic. So definitely our primary caregivers could be parents, could be my extended family. They, in a sense, directly or indirectly, unknowingly, knowingly contribute to that. So do you have any views on that?
So they don't, many times people are not aware of what they are doing to the child. Their intention is to make the child better.
Yes.
But in saying that the child is stupid, or like some of the things, you're not good enough, you're a loser, then what happens is the child actually now has no scope to improve. Now, a healthy way of doing it would be that you are so capable, and this what you have done is not that it doesn't match you. Now what you have done is you've separated the action and the self.
Yes.
And the parent can tell the child that you are a beautiful self, you're a beautiful being, and you can do some such wonders. And this action that you've done, like let's say it can be even a moralistically bad action, like telling lies, or stealing. Let's go to something which is moralistic also, because often shaming also happens with the intensity of the action. Some people, yes, get shamed even for getting low marks. So if it is about marks, the child can be told that you are so brilliant and you need to maybe see what happened in this particular test, but you can still do. And then there is a scope for the child to say, oh, I'm brilliant, something went wrong in that exam, so I can do better. So same way with even lying or cheating. You are such a beautiful person and you are a good person who have made a bad choice. So can you separate these two things? And that would be a healthier way to deal with that. But unfortunately, this is not. This requires conscious parenting. This requires conscious teaching. Teachers and parents, what they do, then the children learn from it, and then the school also becomes a space where bullying happens. The peers are also, so other children do this to other children. So
to siblings.
Where do children learn? Yes, to siblings, to friends, to juniors in school. And all of this is a learned behavior. So children by default have learned from the environment. So if our environment can teach healthy shaming, healthy shame, and as a boundary, as a accountability tool, then it's a healthy environment. Otherwise, we are teaching people to bully each other.
Exactly.
Recently, there was an incident near my locality where somebody had thrown some garbage from, as they were going on a bike, somebody just littered the road. Someone else stopped this person and said, please pick up this litter. You have, you're not following cleanliness. You're littering the place. That's not done. Even though it was the right thing which that person said. But apparently this person took a video also and posted it in our local group. And I saw the video and I realized the reaction from the person who was the bad, who did the bad choice of cleaning the place, had a very violent and extreme reaction to this. And was very angry, used abusive words and all of that. And I was wondering what instigates that kind of a reaction, because then they feel actually shamed.
Shamed, it hits the core of them, and I think it's a reinforcement. In their childhood, they must have been told so many times, you are bad, you're useless, you're stupid. And when something hits that, it's terrible. And the response is
unfortunately, in the video, there is no account. There is no video of what this person said that elicited this response. If this person shamed the person, then automatically there's a defense. There is a certain violence because the other person doesn't like this public, and it also becomes like a humiliation. So now the difference between shame and humiliation is a shaming that I feel I don't deserve to get.
Okay.
So the person might have this righteous anger that, I threw this biscuit packet, but I don't need to be treated this way. I don't deserve this treatment. So there is a certain deserving. I don't deserve this feeling that brings up the rage and brings up the defense and all of that.
Yeah. So, Sushmita, in shame, what you said earlier, where you're saying you are not stupid, your action is inappropriate. So there's a difference between the you are and your action is. That is the difference. So in shame, I feel like I'm bad. My core is bad. In fact, I almost feel it's a dark space. There is no core at all. Everything I do. So even if I do a good action of helping, I sometimes feel, what's the big deal? Anyways, I'm bad. What's the big deal that I did? I do.
Yeah.
So, and that's a deep feeling, because it's like there is no wajud only. There's no essence. There is no existence of that individual, which is
Yeah.
so terrible. And for a
Yeah.
long time, I faced that.
Yeah.
So I know the pain that comes with it. I
Yes.
mean, of course, after stepping out of that, now I feel much more free and liberated. But can we just pause there and talk about what happens to that individual?
Yeah. So what happens to the individual who's been shamed or who has experienced shame, toxic shame? Yeah.
Yes, toxic.
There is an internalization of whatever the other person has said about me. So if I've been shamed. So if my parent has said you are useless, you are
Yes.
good for nothing, I have maybe internalized that.
Yes.
The other possibility is maybe that person said all of that, then I make a conclusion that I am not good enough. Yeah, I am not good enough, or I am not worthy. I should just, and then there'll be even decisions from there that, you know what, I should not connect to people. People will actually see this dark side of me, this dirty side of me. And especially with shame that comes with also sexual abuse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shame gives a boundary about what is how much to indulge in pleasure and pain, right? And what happens is, in sexual abuse, there is an inappropriateness of the experience, and that itself brings about shame. And then what happens is the child actually thinks something is dirty about me.
Yes.
How could I allow myself to have experienced this? And I did something wrong. Yeah. And many times abusers also put this thought in the child that if you are so pretty, or you are your skin is so soft, or you like this, right? And sometimes abusers even use pleasure as a tool to hook the child, and then the child actually gets confused. Yeah, I am liking this, but this is not appropriate, and there's so much confusion.
Yes.
And then what happens? There is secrecy, silence, and judgment, and all of this breeds shame. It grows shame. So the abuser says, don't tell anybody about this. Yeah, you liked it, but you can't go and tell anybody. Like if I watched a movie and I liked it, I would go tell 10 people, right? But here you have experienced something, but you can't talk about it. Yeah. And if you talk about it, you will be judged. Now, there have been cases in when I've worked with my clients where clients have gone to their parents and told, this uncle touched me in this inside my panty, or something like that. And then the parent has said, don't talk about it, or you must have done something wrong, or some judgment has come. Because the parent goes into denial. Oh, this can't have happened to my child. Yeah. And then the judgment, the silence, the secrecy. Sometimes the mother doesn't respond, or the father doesn't respond, just says, don't go near that uncle, just keep quiet. Don't talk about this. Now, secrecy, silence, and judgment will actually make the shame grow. So as we grow up, this is a shame that I carry. It's like you said, the dark core. It's a part of me that I cannot talk about. And so when the hashtag Me Too movement came, why was there a need for people to put hashtag Me Too all over Facebook, all over social media? Because they needed to break that secrecy and that silence. And breaking that secrecy and silence is the healing for the shame. And if it is received when I break the shame and secrecy and silence, how is it received also determines
absolutely
whether I will continue to feel the shame or will I heal the shame. So if I have an empathetic crowd, the crowd says, oh, we are with you, this is absolutely wrong, what happened to you, then you feel that the shame is healed. But earlier, like thanks to the social media and the awareness that spreads, there is a certain way in which at least half the crowd receives it with empathy. But imagine the earlier times where there was no social media. Think of our grandparents' times. Who spoke about it? They would have been like, you wore the wrong dress, or why were you out in the night? Why did you go to other people's houses? Why can't you stay in the playground and play? Or why couldn't you have come back before 6 o'clock?
Now that or even why did you wear an orange or a red nail polish?
Yeah. Yeah, ridiculous reason.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
and
yeah,
what happens is the child actually feels
yeah.
there is no empathy. Now I have broken the silence, I have
Yes,
broken
yes,
the secrecy, but there was no empathy to receive that
yes.
person's shame. And then what happens? There's a deepening of the shame. There's a reshaming that happens. And
Mm,
that is even worse. And I'm
yes,
glad that in today's world, we can talk about sexual abuse, we can talk about rape and whatever has happened. We can really voice out what is shaming to a person. We can
yes,
voice out and say, no, this is not done. Yeah.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
is, I have a huge hope about this, you know.
Yes, yes. There's another context to it. Even children who have alcoholic parents grow up with a lot of shame. Can you touch upon that?
Yeah, I think if when I went to Germany, uh, there was this healthy attitude towards alcohol. There's an
Yeah.
Oktober fest. It's like our Navaratri. They have an Oktober fest, and
Okay.
there is a celebration with alcohol, and there's a social standing for alcohol. But in
Hmm.
India, alcohol is already an evil thing. Yeah,
Yes.
and what we try to control the most always goes out of proportion, right? And so even though we did have alcohol from the ancient times, yeah, yet it was shamed, and it was said that it's wrong, and then people went overboard with it. So any kind of extreme control will always create a certain rebellion,
Yes.
and then rebellion brings about an overuse and overindulgence of that substance. And
Yes.
so what has happened in Indian society, alcohol is associated with something wrong.
Hmm.
Now there again, there are many gradations. Yeah, so if a rich man is having alcohol, that's okay, but if a poor man is having alcohol, it's not okay. If a man
Hmm.
is having alcohol, it's okay. If a woman is having alcohol, it's not okay,
Hmm.
right? So there's so many social inequalities also in that. Yeah.
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
a Brahmin cannot have alcohol. Yeah,
Hmm.
but some other caste, I don't know which caste is allowed to have alcohol, but
Hmm.
Muslims don't have alcohol.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so there is also a religious connotation to it. There's so many shades to it. There's so much of coloring of what is right and wrong by
Hmm.
so many ways, and
Yeah.
therefore alcohol has this very complex place in our culture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then shame. Now comes a child in a household where the parent, let's say one parent is alcoholic. Yeah. Now this child goes to school, sees other children. There are other children's parents who come to drop, and this child longingly looks at the father or the mother who is dropping the child and who's having no non-alcoholic behavior. And now this child feels, I wish my parents were like this. Yeah.
Hmm.
And sometimes, now again, I will keep it a secret. I will keep it a secret. Nobody knows that my father is alcoholic. I would say he's too busy, he can't come to school. Yeah.
Hmm.
People will probably ask, we have never seen your father, why he never comes. Yeah. And I might say, oh, I don't, he's too busy, he can't come. But then let's say one particular day the father becomes so alcoholic, he shows up at school and brings the roof down or behaves badly. Now there is, the
It's good.
cat is out. And then, is there empathy? That's the question. But there is no empathy very often. Everybody is looking at this child, and the child is feeling isolated and alone. So what happens is the isolation and the loneliness in that experience also deepens the trauma.
Hmm.
And extreme shame here. And then
Hmm.
all the shame about, oh, all these days you lied. Oh, this is the real truth. So you're even a liar. Your father
Hmm.
is an alcoholic, you are a liar. Now all
Hmm.
these stamps, yeah, your
Yeah.
father is alcoholic, you are a liar, you will be like your father only. So many such stamps are given. Sometimes I shudder when I hear my clients talk about what teachers have said to children. Like
Hmm.
when I do child work, there's so many times teachers have said such statements which makes me think, oh my God, how can a teacher say this?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes I feel the training is inadequate.
Yeah.
And I feel we need to bring in this kind of a training, a holistic training. And there are many schools that are doing it today. I'm so glad about that.
Yeah, yeah. I do not think the teachers, the parents knew what that statement is going to do to the child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yes.
awareness was in there,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the other
And
one is,
they overworked, they are frustrated, and then they have their own troubles at home,
yes,
and
yes,
then they have no way to actually talk about it. In our society, our biggest problem is log kya kahenge is one tool
yeah,
that we use to shame people and tell them don't do anything which the society will not approve.
that's true.
So what
That's true.
happens, even
I
if
have to
something
align.
bad in my life, inside my home, I will not talk about it.
Yes,
Outside, I will put up a very nice, brilliant picture. It's an outside image that I live up to for the society's sake.
yes,
Inside, a lot can be happening inside the four walls, and then this leads to this kind of a disparity in what we.
yes,
And so what happens? Everybody starts doing that. So in our culture, very often, like when I ask my clients, do you think you're the only person going through this? Do you know others who are going through similar experiences? They say, no, I don't know anybody who's going through this. Like be it a relationship issue, be it addictions, be it anything. And unfortunately, because our society is so secretive,
yeah,
you
we
should
do.
anything that happens at home, it should remain in our
Yes,
home. It should not be spoken about.
yes,
And so what
yes,
happens is we keep secrets, and then
yes,
we give an image to the society, all is well in my world. And then everybody has this pressure to live up to that
yeah,
standards that is actually a fake standard.
yes.
And then when they come to me for therapy and they say, I think I'm the only one going through this. In fact,
Mm,
many people believe that they were the only ones who went through sexual abuse in their locality. Let's say there's a neighborhood uncle who's touched her badly, him or her. Even boys get
yeah,
abused, and they can't even talk about it. Now children don't know that others are experiencing this.
yeah,
Other children are also experiencing this. They don't even know. They feel so alone in this experience.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Correct. And body shaming is yet another thing which is
Yeah.
so prevalent. Which,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm thin. There's a problem. I'm fat. There is a problem. And then
And
this
that
thing, you won't get married if you're fat.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so prevalent.
And then this gender stereotypes, right?
Gender
You are not
stereotypes.
behaving like a girl, you're not behaving like a boy. Do girly stuff if you're a girl, do boyish stuff if you're a boy. You can't be liking pink color if you're a boy. If you can't be
Yeah,
liking black color or blue color if you're a girl. So it's so
yeah.
the social structures are very oppressive, and shame is one of the oppressing tools.
Yes, yes. So what's the difference between shame and guilt?
So shame is basically, it reflects about the self, while guilt is what I have done.
Yeah.
So guilt is I have done something which is wrong, while shame is I am wrong. There's something wrong with me that
Yeah.
I did this way. So
Yeah.
for example, if I did something wrong, let's say I didn't do well in my school. Yeah. Uh, Let me give my own example. So when I was in second standard, till my second standard, I had not understood the idea behind what is exams, right? Like I would just not write the answers, like these long end of the year exams, which were longer than the usual tests. So I could do the tests at school because it was like a 10-minute test. I could always score full marks in that. But what happened when I was in till my second standard, I would never write my final exams, and I was always promoted with warning. Now, as a child, I had no clue what the warning was. Okay, like I was warned, I would say, in defense, but promoted with warning, and I thought that's how it was. Like everybody gets promoted with warning. Yeah, and as a child in second standard, when I finally did it, even in second standard, my school decided that they are going to detain me to teach me that I have to write the exam. Now, glad that they don't do that nowadays, but in those days, this was it's too harsh something to do for a child who's actually good enough, knows the answers, but is not writing it in the exam. Yeah. I was detained, and came this shaming. So I did second standard twice. Okay. Shaming that came with that, it is extreme. Like, I have done self-work through my 9 years as a therapist. We also do our self-work. Every time I visit this child, there are new deeper layers of work that I have to do with this child, because there is this entire batch of students that go away and they are looking at you like a loser. My friends have moved on. Now I'm alone. There's this new batch of classmates who come. They are looking at me like, who the hell are you? And you know what's the answer? Who the hell are you? I have failed. Teachers have said she's a failure. And this self-defeating dhappa that happened, that was extremely shameful. So shameful that it woke me up to a level of consciousness that, I have to write my exams. I have to study well. I have to do this. I have to study harder. Now that shame has brought out so much accountability in me that today I am a PhD. Yeah. I studied. After that, I studied like crazy, to the point that I was a nerd in my college days. I was a nerd in my MSc, PhD, all through, like I had nothing else to look at. I didn't have a healthy infatuation or healthy boyfriend, crushes. I had no time for all that. That shame drove me to the point of me doing a PhD.
Yeah. Now, but doesn't that erode your emotional well-being? Because our topic is also that.
Yes. So what happens is, student that PhD actually making me feel good. But even after doing a PhD, I didn't feel enough deep inside. It was not enough. And that's what shame does to us. Even a PhD does not feel enough.
Exactly.
Inside, which seems to never change. And that's when I went into therapy, and I went into experiences of understanding, why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling like a defeat, a failure? And then all of these things came up in my sessions, and that was a huge breakthrough in my journey, or a milestone in my journey of healing.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's very powerful when you say even a PhD didn't feel enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But today I feel enough. It's good.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I've seen, because I've lived through these experiences, I've seen that the shame and guilt have these narratives. They run as lines or verses or words or energy or sensations in different parts. I used to feel the sensation in the pit of my stomach, maybe gut or whatever. And I knew, at that time I didn't know, but when I was processing shame, I realized when that comes, this is shame. So can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of don't understand how it shows up. Not in terms of behavior, but how do we know? How does it manifest the words?
The manifestation of shame. Yes. So shame can manifest in the body as addictions. Yeah. Yes. We can be quite addicted to many things. Yes. Even workaholism could be a shame adaptation. Absolutely. Yeah, it can manifest as a personality trait, as a low self-esteem or an introverted person. Yeah, these are personality traits. And then it can manifest in the physical body as a sensation. Like you said, when I go through shame, I feel like, there are these different parts in my body. I feel something like a churning in my stomach. And now this can be very different for different people.
Yes.
Yeah? Some people feel sweaty in their palms. Yes. Some people feel a churning in the stomach. Some people feel their heart rate is elevated, and maybe even a combination of these things. Yes. So it manifests somatically in the body. Yes. It manifests emotionally as low self-esteem and low self-image. And shame can also manifest as an overcompensation, as a narcissism can be a overcompensation person. Deep down, he or she is carrying shame, but actually is overcompensating, saying, "Oh, I am so great," And narcissism can be an overcompensation for shame. So personality traits, and then it can manifest as violence and abuse. Yeah, behaviorally. So there's a behavior of extreme bitterness, violence, being abusive, manipulative. And so what happens is, why does a person be manipulative? Because they feel very unsafe. So then what they have to do is manipulate their way around. Yeah. And then it manifests in bad relationships. Therefore, because of all of these things, addictions, or alcoholism, or workaholism, or all of these manifestations then can also affect how relationships manifest, how we interact with people.
Yes. And as I hear you say, and as I connect to my own experience, one of the biggest thing is inauthenticity. I think after a point, I don't know what's me. What am I putting on, and what is really me? There is a kind of a fragmentation from myself, because there is no self.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest
false identity. Yeah, false identity, or compensating identity, or even we withdraw. We become, then we start making these narratives like, I am not an extrovert, I'm not a people person, I don't like to be standing on stages, I'm not a stage person. Now these are all defenses, actually.
I don't care about
and sometimes I don't care about people also can be.
And I don't care what they say about me, but that's not true. And that's why I feel there is a lot of pain in carrying. And I think for me, it used to be workaholism. Like when I was working, because I was in a very senior position, I had to put up something, and I was excellent at what I did. But the cost, I mean, the process in achieving that was extremely, it would erode my well-being. I did it at a cost. And I think that is the day, one fine day, I said, I can't do this. I'm not enjoying it. But actually, it was not work. It was what I was going through. And that's when started my own journey, my own therapy, which is 8 years back. And then realizing it. So even I've seen, like, when I now when I do coaching, career coaching with a lot of people, I see a lot of these narratives, and they're saying my career is not good, but actually it is not career. It is the other things which grip you, which doesn't allow you to be who you have to be, or you're capable of being. So that's the issue, and that is what we lose when we are in these narratives.
Yes.
How does it, you talked about relationships, so how does it impact relationships negatively?
So shame, how does it impact? So if there is toxic shame, so now I don't want to connect because connecting has been unsafe. So then what happens is I don't make myself vulnerable. And for relationships to work, I need to actually make myself vulnerable in a relationship. I need to be able to bear myself fully in a relationship, but I don't. So what happens is intimacy takes a hit. So when I can't be vulnerable, then there's no intimacy. So then what happens is there is always a disconnect. And the internal disconnect manifests as the external disconnect. Because if I'm not connected within to myself, how can I be connected to somebody else?
Absolutely.
So
exactly.
Then yes, and also all the behavioral issues that comes with how shame manifests. Like maybe if let's say there is a person who's a workaholic, is no longer available for the relationship. Marriage becomes a problem. Marriage or a couple's relationship becomes a problem because I'm too much involved in my work. That becomes my priority. And that becomes my shield. It's a wall I've put up. And I don't let somebody get beyond that wall, get close to me. And so the other person feels, left behind, or feels there is nothing in this relationship. Now the other person may stray in the sense, may look for what is missing here in an external environment. And then comes all the betrayal, the lying, the cheating, and all of that.
Yes.
There can be domestic abuse that comes with shame, because there is violence with shame.
Yeah. So can I get rid of shame?
I would say I don't know if we can ever get rid of shame. Okay. I think it is more about holding shame with empathy which is what heals it. So when I look back at my second standard inner child, if I have empathy for that child, then I can look at it. If I don't have empathy, if I look at it with judgment, if I look at it with what a loser I was not even knowing to write exams, how stupid was that? So if I'm going to be self-critical and I'm going to judge myself for it, then it's going to create more shame. But if I so why wouldn't that child write an exam? Because the child actually didn't understand the school system for a long time. Feel the need to prove. The child actually felt, I'm good enough. Why do I have to keep writing this exam again and again? It makes sense to the child. So actually having an empathetic view to the child.
Which means I need to identify those instances where I experienced shame, isn't it? Yes. Like you could identify the second standard child, but many of us may not really know when I was shamed.
Yes. So you'll have to maybe remember shameful experiences. Sometimes we remember, sometimes we repress it.
Yes.
So maybe therapy can help you find those experiences, access those experiences. Or the other approach, let's say I don't have access to a memory from childhood. So there are people who come to me saying, actually my childhood was fairly fine. Blanket statement. It's almost like it's all locked and put under the carpet. Now, what do I do with people who are not able to access their past experiences? I usually do cognitive work. So when we do cognitive work, we are actually working with, is that what you really believe about yourself? Is that really true? Now, these are cognitive questions we can ask. So if somebody says, I'm not enough, CBT actually works a lot like that, asking those questions. Is that really true? Is there evidence that you're not good enough? What are the evidences that you are actually good? Right? So like that, this kind of cognitive help can also work with people. So that's why, like in the beginning, I said, some people regression work will be great, but for some others, it may be cognitive work. And shame actually triggers a fight, flight, freeze response, the limbic brain response. And in order to come out of that frozen state, out of that limbic response, we'll have to engage the prefrontal cortex, the cognitive part of the brain, by asking these questions. And that is the way we can actually weed ourselves out. We can make ourselves come out of that shame from that limbic state and come out and look at that shame with awareness. And really, is that really true? Is it really true that I was not a brilliant student? And actually, I in fact asked this to my mother when I was in 10th or 11th. I asked my mother, how was I in school? So was I really so bad? And my mother said, no, the tests you used to score full marks. And then it really shook me. And I was like, oh, I was not stupid, or I was not. So now imagine that I am stupid, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, gets reframed into, I didn't do that exam. It goes into action. So you've separated the self and you've separated the action and say, okay, so now I didn't do the exam. So obviously there had been a consequence to that. And now can I learn from it and move on?
Yes. And which you did.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're using the power of your awareness, of your consciousness, to shine light on that incident and the narratives, and then change it. Excellent.
And sometimes you can even ask, who said this to you? Like if I am a failure, who said this to you? It was my peers in my class. So can I let go of this? This is their perspective, and that too perspective of children like me, who were probably 7 years old, 6, 7 years old. Right? And why should I take that perspective and live my life based on that perspective? So now this is a cognitive de-stranding of sorts. So we cognitively look at what happened with empathy, understand that, okay, children don't know better, therefore they also judged you, and you can maybe let go of this judgment, and we can now hold an awareness of why this happened and how it has impacted me, how I've adapted from there. And how today, the day I actually help that inner child feel that you are enough. That day, I felt all the satisfaction of my journey, the entire journey.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I think this gives us a fantastic holistic idea of what is the energy of these emotions, and what can be done. So
Yeah.
if any one of us are facing this, I think going to a therapist and in a safe space, exploring what are those statements, either cognitively or through regressive or any other technique, or
Yes.
reach out to even Dr. Sushmita, anybody actually,
Yeah.
so that
And even to you.
we don't need to carry, we don't need to carry the burden. And there's an opportunity to look at it and provide empathy to ourselves. And I think I say this because I think I am the most dearest person to myself. If I don't do this to myself, then who else will do? And I think I owe it to myself in this life, and sooner and not later, to heal myself, to let the burden go, and move on with light and brightness and well-being.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think great perspectives, Doctor, and so awesome. Any message that you want to leave before we close? Any message you want to leave for the viewers?
I would say it's a very, very vast topic. So I would probably leave the viewers with some resources. I would ask people to follow Brené Brown. She actually has done a PhD in this work on shame and guilt and all of that. And her book, what's her book's name? The Gifts of Imperfection. That's a beautiful book. Like, I don't have to be perfect. I can be imperfect. And she often, she even speaks about a chant that she says, I need to get it right. I don't have to be right. So when I say I can get it right, I give scope for me to make mistakes, to fumble, to unlearn, relearn, and get to a point of being right at that point in time. And maybe there's always a scope to relearn and improve. And I have to be right. On the other hand, gives me no scope for growth. So this chant is also something Brené Brown talked about in one of her videos, and there are many YouTube videos about her talks, her TED talks. And John Bradshaw has written a book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. That is also amazing, when he talks about toxic shame and healthy shame. So I really feel these are very prominent people who worked in this area, and that's a resource people can tap into. And I think you have also some further programs on this, right? So people can kind of chat.
Yeah, on October 10th, I'm holding a workshop. It's the Purna Wellbeing Circle for the month of October. And it's the same workshop. So there, what we are planning to do is to really take this workshop, take this topic and apply to our life, and look at how can we identify shame and guilt from our life, and can we look at those instances with empathy, like you rightly said, and look at, really, am I that, or am I beyond that, or am I something else? So that the attempt is basically to reduce the burden, so that we can shine light. And that's from 3 to 4:30. And if I will definitely be sharing it on Purna Wellbeing page on Monday or Tuesday. So if that calls you, you can definitely register for that. Thank you for bringing it to my consciousness.
That's beautiful. What you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. So that's what now, Doctor, what we have tried to do is take up a topic and 15 days do the Chetana, the Samvada, and the circle on the same topic, so that it allows people to really go deeper and look at it from different perspectives. Because what the perspective I have, you added something so beautifully. In the workshop, we bring something else. So every topic, like you said, is so deep and vast that just 1 hour, 2 hours, 1.5 hours is not enough.
Yes. And it's a journey.
Yes, it's a journey. Yeah, absolutely. And also it's in a capsule form. Too much also one can't digest.
Yeah. It's important to be gentle and kind and compassionate when you're dealing with shame.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. And stay tuned to whatever we are doing, and wherever you think you can contribute, please. I mean, we would be happy to have you back again in a way that that we can explore. We can let it emerge. Yeah. So thank you so much.
So much, Deepa, and thank you all for listening in, and lot of empathy and love from us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all, and have a great evening.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.